What Camilla just realized behind closed doors is that the grandest fortress can be dismantled by a single change in an electronic security code. In less than 60 seconds of clinical administrative execution, the ultimate symbol of her sovereignty was quietly revoked without a single word spoken in anger. She was standing deep within the secure subterranean corridors of Windsor Castle, prepared to access the private sovereign vaults, when a routine scan of her security credential flashed a devastating crimson. Access denied. This is the story of the hidden asset grab Camilla attempted over the late Queen Elizabeth's private historical collection. How Prince William uncovered the digital paper trail of her unauthorized entries, the ruthless institutional retaliation that followed, and the cold realization that despite wearing the crown, Camilla remains completely locked out of the future. What this video will unpack is a masterclass in silent institutional warfare that has been playing out behind the velvet ropes in the spring of 2026. We will examine the exact forensic audit Prince William launched to protect the monarchy's physical heritage, the secret late-night movements into the royal archives that triggered the crisis, and the moment Camilla realized that her influence over King Charles could no longer protect her from the tightening grip of the next generation. We will see how a routine administrative update was actually used to strip a sitting queen of her operational autonomy, sending a clear, devastating message about who truly owns the kingdom. To understand the sheer weight of this confrontation, we must first rebuild the illusion of absolute power that Camilla has spent the last 30 years cultivating. For decades, she played a long, disciplined game, systematically moving from the shadows of public hatred into the bright light of the coronation. She successfully managed the erasure of Princess Diana's physical dominance within the royal narrative, carefully positioned her non-royal children on the periphery of state power, and assumed absolute control over the daily environment of King Charles. In early 2026, as the king retreated further into intensive medical treatments, Camilla's authority appeared entirely uncontested. She was leading major state events, commanding the attention of global dignitaries, and operating under the assumption that she had finally secured a fortress that could never be breached. She felt completely untouchable, wrapped in a protective layer of carefully curated public relations and absolute domestic influence. That detail matters because it was this exact sense of absolute security that drove Camilla into a reckless miscalculation. As the reality of the king's fragile health became impossible to ignore, a quiet panic began to develop within her inner circle. What appears to be true is that Camilla recognized that her time at the apex of the institution was strictly limited by her husband's lifespan. Driven by what analysts recognize as commercial desperation, her office began initiating a series of quiet requests aimed at the Royal Collection Trust and the Sovereign Archives. Her objective was subtle but immense. She sought to establish independent control over a highly specific portfolio of historic jewelry, private personal correspondence, and unallocated royal assets before they could be legally finalized for the next reign. She wanted to secure these physical manifestations of sovereign favor, ensuring that her family would possess a tangible, multi-million-dollar leverage point once she was reduced to the status of a dowager. The trigger for the institutional retaliation occurred when palace security officials noticed a series of irregular, undocumented access logs tied to the heavy vault doors beneath Windsor Castle. These were not routine visits conducted during normal operational hours with a full retinue of curators. Instead, the data trail revealed a pattern of late-evening entries into the secure, climate-controlled rooms where the most sacred personal pieces of Queen Elizabeth's private collection are stored. Camilla was attempting to quietly bypass the traditional oversight committees, treating the private historical archives as a personal treasury. Her goal was to select and move specific heirloom pieces, particularly those closely associated with the late Queen and those coveted by Princess Catherine, into her own private quarters at Highgrove and Clarence House. She believed that by physically possessing these symbols of royal majesty, she could dictate the visual narrative of the monarchy's transition, But inside the modern British monarchy, the illusion of power always shatters against the reality of administrative discipline. Prince William does not manage the royal estates like a distant landlord. He oversees them with the forensic eye of a modern chief executive officer. As the controller of the vast Duchy of Cornwall and the de facto supervisor of the family's long-term logistical security, William receives detailed weekly digital audits of all sovereign asset movements. When the irregular access logs and the unusual requests for jewelry transfers crossed his desk, the strategy was immediately unmasked. William did not see a queen admiring family history. He saw a calculated attempt to exploit his father's illness and siphon away the physical heritage meant to secure the reign of Princess Catherine. For William, this crossed a sacred line, threatening the deliberate preservation of the core royal bloodline. What happened next illustrates the devastating power of weaponized protocol. Prince William did not initiate a loud confrontation or allow a single whisper to escape to the tabloid press. Instead, he coordinated a silent legal ambush with the unyielding assistance of Princess Anne, the ultimate guardian of institutional order. Together, they quietly convened an extraordinary meeting of the Royal Collection Trust auditors and senior legal advisors. William presented the undeniable forensic proof of the irregular vault entries, framing the situation not as a personal dispute, but as a severe breach of asset protection protocol. He utilized the strict administrative machinery of the palace to draft a comprehensive structural update to the royal household guidelines. This binding document, designed to safeguard all unallocated historical assets, implemented a rigorous two-factor authorization system for any entry into the sovereign vaults, explicitly requiring the co-signature of the Prince of Wales's office for any asset removals. The execution of this silent revenge was designed to land with clinical precision. William did not hand the new directive to Camilla himself. He allowed the palace's administrative apparatus to deliver the blow through standard corporate channels. When Camilla arrived at the Windsor Vault entrance expecting her customary absolute deference, she discovered that the system had already been updated. The electronic lock did not recognize her independent authority and the security staff, operating under direct orders from the highest levels of the institutional audit, politely but firmly informed her that entry could not be granted without an approved countersignature from the Prince of Wales. The visual humiliation of a reigning queen being turned away by a computerized terminal and a silent security guard was total. It was a cold, unmistakable notification that the keys to the kingdom had officially changed hands while she was busy curating her public image. Livid and deeply shaken by this sudden containment, Camilla immediately retreated to the private quarters of Buckingham Palace to demand an absolute intervention from King Charles. She expected the same unyielding defense that her husband had provided throughout their three-decade partnership, believing he would use his sovereign prerogative to overrule his son's administrative overreach. She demanded that the security protocols be dismantled and that William be formally reprimanded for insubordination against the Queen. But as she laid out her furious grievance, she was met with a response that caused the entire room to go cold. King Charles did not summon his advisors, he did not rage against the restrictions, and he did not issue a sovereign decree to restore her access. Instead, the king sat in agonizing, paralyzed silence and simply looked away. Charles, who had spent his entire life defying the public and confronting his own family to place Camilla on the throne, chose his son. The king's refusal to speak was the moment the trap snapped completely shut, leaving Camilla to realize that she was standing completely unprotected against the brutal machinery of the future. The psychological climax of this institutional war was not a screaming match in the corridors. It was a frail monarch staring at the floor, acknowledging that his own authority had expired and leaving his wife to face the cold, ruthless reality that she owns absolutely nothing. The silence of King Charles in that private room was not merely a domestic failure to protect his wife. It was the formal institutional surrender of a reigning monarch. For decades, Charles had moved heaven and earth to validate Camilla, challenging the established church, defying public hostility, and straining his relationship with his own mother just to place a crown on her head. Yet when confronted with the cold digital evidence of her asset grab, he sat paralyzed. His silence was the definitive psychological climax of their entire partnership. Charles was not simply choosing his son over his wife. He was acknowledging a brutal constitutional reality. The king understood that the sovereign is merely a temporary custodian, while the crown itself belongs to the future. By refusing to overrule William and Anne, Charles effectively signed the decree of his wife's impending isolation, leaving her to face the machinery of succession completely unprotected. This profound abandonment forced Camilla to confront the true scope of her commercial desperation. To the casual observer, a British queen is surrounded by unimaginable wealth, moving through historic castles and guarded by state security. But behind the velvet ropes of the Royal Collection Trust, the financial architecture tells a completely different story. Camilla owns absolutely nothing. When Charles ascended the throne, the multi-billion-dollar engine of the Duchy of Cornwall passed automatically and entirely to Prince William. This estate is not an honorary title. It is a massive corporate reality that controls the private wealth, the agricultural lands, and the discretionary funding that sustains the daily lives of the royal family. William controls the liquid assets, the property leases, and the payroll. If King Charles passes away, William assumes immediate control of the Duchy of Lancaster and all sovereign estates. Camilla will not inherit a single palace. She will not control a single administrative ledger. The contrast between Camilla's ambitions and her actual security is devastating. Unlike the late Queen Mother, who enjoyed an independent palace, a massive personal staff, and a virtually unlimited institutional overdraft supported by a devoted public, Camilla faces a chillingly isolated future. The private property Charles recently purchased in Wiltshire using his personal funds was not a romantic retreat. It was an emergency life raft. It stands as undeniable forensic proof that both Charles and Camilla know she will be quietly, but firmly evicted from the inner sanctum of royal power the moment her husband's reign ends. Without independent wealth or sovereign deeds, she is a temporary tenant in an empire controlled by her enemies, fully aware that her lifestyle, her security, and her household budget will be entirely dependent on the financial mercy of King William V. As Camilla's administrative shadow recedes, the physical architecture of the palace is rapidly shifting to restore a very different legacy. The silent execution of institutional revenge is best witnessed in the subtle, devastating realignments of court protocol and visual symbolism. Behind closed doors, certain portraits of the late Princess of Wales are being systematically brought out of deep storage and returned to prominent viewing areas within the royal residences. These are not decorative choices. They are constant, deliberate reminders of the lineage that truly matters. More crucially, the allocation of historic jewelry, which represents the ultimate physical manifestation of sovereign favor, has been locked down. The iconic pieces most closely associated with Diana are no longer available for Camilla's choosing. They have been legally and permanently earmarked for Princess Catherine, ensuring that the visual narrative of the monarchy entirely bypasses the current queen consort and links the past directly to the future. This weaponization of administrative protocol extends directly to Camilla's non-royal family. For months, she had attempted to integrate her children Tom and Laura into the core fabric of court life, subtly positioning them for long-term social and institutional prominence. But the new directives have established an impenetrable wall. During upcoming state functions, the logistical movements of Camilla's family members are heavily restricted. They are no longer permitted to utilize the main state entrances or mix seamlessly with the blood royal line. Instead, they are being systematically directed to side doors, their names quietly omitted from official circulars, and their presence tolerated rather than integrated. It is a clinical, analytical dismantling of everything Camilla spent 30 years building, executed without a single public scandal or an open argument. The ultimate tragedy of Camilla's strategic ambition is that she mistook proximity to the throne for ownership of the crown. She played a masterful short game, capturing the devotion of a king and securing the ultimate title. But the long game always belongs to the institution itself, guarded by a son who remembers his mother's grief and a daughter-in-law who has flawlessly secured the emotional loyalty of the entire nation. When the inevitable day comes and Charles's reign ends, Camilla's legal position instantly evaporates. She will become a dowager, a term that signifies a connection to the past with zero authority over the future. The empire she tried to hijack will be entirely gone, leaving her in a privately purchased house looking at a crown that was only ever on loan. If you found this forensic breakdown of royal power dynamics and institutional warfare insightful, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Prince William's administrative containment of Camilla is the ultimate restoration of the rightful line? Make sure to subscribe to the channel as we continue to track the silent battles shaping the future of the monarchy.